who's one of the speakers this evening, retired last summer, I believe, right? So I just started about 6 weeks ago. A little bit about me. I transitioned into dental from retail. So I spent 16 years with Bonmar. If any of you are familiar with that, it's in Louisville at Oxford Mall. As a general manager for that company, I moved around a lot. So a lot of what I do is very, very similar to the position that I'm in now. So a lot of transition with that. So there's two big things that we really look at when we are, in a management position. It is people, and that's going to be the people that you manage, your team, the ones you work with every day, and your customers, your vendors, all of those different things. So Kevin's going to be speaking about that portion tonight. And then there's also the money, right? So that's kind of the other big component that goes into a business. So, for that portion of tonight, we've got Kristina Johnson, who's with Fortune. So, very, very excited. I was privy to, a little preview of this last night, of what they're both going to talk about. And it was really, really good stuff. So I'm very excited for you both, or for you to hear from both of them. They're both full of knowledge, excellent presentations. So let's get started. So Kevin, you go first?
Yeah.
All right.
Just figure that thing out.
Pretty handy.
Cool.
Okay, got it. We have two microphones tonight. The other piece of that, just have to say it before I even start out, is Noah he just isn't the guy who just sort of put some things together for SDBO. He was a visionary, and the first time I saw him, I was just telling my wife over here a minute ago, my wife Dana, right here, came first time ever to an SDBO. Yay. We're grandbaby sitting today, so I brought her along with me. I'm glad she could be here. More than just putting together. Well, he was a pre-dental. He was an undergrad when he attended the first SDBO event. Did y'all know that? Looked back in the back and I said, "Who brought the kid to tonight's event?" He looked so young back then, still does, which is really good, by the way. And we sat down probably a year or two later, whenever it was, and he was much more involved. And he said, "Let me show you these pillars that I want to put together for SDBO." And those same pillars that he put together on his own are now the model that's being used for SDBO nationwide. John Harris and team have adopted those as well. So he's well beyond what you think just an organizer, and put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in it. A remarkable individual, very, very intelligent, and thank you for all you've done for the entire organization, not just here in Kentucky, by the way. So thank you again. And congratulations again to both of you. That was shocking in a good way. Before I start, I did want to point out, sponsorships make this thing happen, by the way. We've had 130 students at these events in years past. That's a lot. So Kristina will talk about Fortune, and when she gets up and talks in just a minute. But also, there's two other sponsors here tonight, and one of my absolute favorites from the very beginning, Roberts Insurance. You guys know him, right? You all know Joe? Stand up, Joe. You know Joe? We all know Joe. Joe, from the very beginning, has said, "I will do this sponsorship because I really like the whole concept and the idea," and he's been such a loyal sponsor and friend to all of you guys. So I hope if you haven't had a chance to meet him, trust me, you wish you had. Do you want to say anything real quick? Anything at all?
Hi. It's just an incredible organization. I have been a sponsor since the very beginning. I just cannot get over the information that they relate to you all every month. It's so valuable. And I'm just happy to be a part of it. And we help with disability insurance. It's really important, especially if you get into your third or fourth year. So if I haven't met with you, I would love to, and hope to get to know you all soon in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. We're going to talk about how important partnerships are tonight. Also, another sponsor from the very beginning was CAR. And if you don't know what CAR does, you'll at some point you'll figure that out, right? So Clinton's here tonight with CAR as well. Seth is not able to make it, but you're closer, I assume, right? So anything you want to say real quick, Clinton?
Sure, yeah. I'll introduce myself, Clinton Conley. I'm new to CAR. I've been in dental for 15 years now, and we help only work for the buyer tenant. Doctor does not pay us a dime for our real estate services. So just really happy to be here, and thank you all.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, and from Patterson, real quick, you already met Liz, our new general manager. We're so excited you're here.
Thank you.
I'm still using present tense, and I retired in September. Angie Schiavone with Patterson, Nicole Mueller back here. You all met Nicole before, and Joan has been coming to these things for 3 years now. Joan Wilcoxon. So, did I get everybody? Yeah, I got everybody right. Okay. Did I miss anybody? So, you know what? I decided sort of last minute to kind of change this up a little bit. So I made a few modifications to this presentation today. And we really did feel like when we created the agenda, I think Elijah and Noah were both in the summer months saying, hey, what do we need to have on our agenda for the year? And this particular session tonight was going to really be about talking about practice. But the one area that kind of concerns many of you, I have a feeling, and the one that you need to know more about. The first one is HR-related, people-related. Particularly since COVID, as we know, it's been challenging to lead people. As you all know, workforce shortages have really hit us hard, with all folks like me retiring and not as many people coming in. And we know that expectations for salaries have gone up. You're going to be facing that. That's not going away anytime soon. And then just generally, how to lead people, how to manage people. We felt like that was very important in our discussions. And the other piece of it, of course, is the big one, and that's the financial component, budgets and all those things and managing your practice. So we wanted to do both of them, so we kind of combined both of them tonight. So Kristina's going to take the second half. And I want to make this informal. As always, these events have always been informal. We'll keep them that way. So to stick with the informal theme, I went with my fire department theme, just because there's some really cool comparisons. I just got back from a conference, a leadership conference down in Pensacola, Florida, where I spent 5 days really hearing from some of the most amazing speakers in the fire service. You guys are going, I'm a dentist. What do I care about the fire service? There's a lot of parallels. So I thought, let's have some fun with this tonight. Maybe you'll learn something about the fire department. And I called it Fully Involved Leadership, and because in the fire service, fully involved means a structure that's well involved in fire. We're working one right now in Oldham County as we speak. The chief is not going to be happy with me because I'm not there. But this is an example of fully involved leadership. This was in July. My team knows about this fire that we had the Glenn Chrysler dealership. This was a Sunday morning. I rolled up on this as the incident commander and had to manage basically a 3-alarm fire. That's fully involved, and it was fairly intense. And there's a lot to do when you're managing a fire. You can't even imagine. You got to protect your people. The heat index was 108 degrees that day. 108. And I got firefighters in gear, and I mean, it was tremendous. Protecting my guys, right? And girls. When you're involved in leading people, you need to be fully involved as well. And from a management of people perspective, there are some things that I've just kind of learned from seeing and managing my team, which by the way is an amazing team here in Kentucky, that I thought I would share with you guys because I think it's something that you might benefit from. So if you learn one thing, I think that's a good thing tonight. So leadership versus management. We all know that leadership and management are two different things, right? But they cross over, right? So, one thing kind of leads to the other. And when you lead, you're sometimes managing. When you're managing, you're sometimes leading, in those same concepts that you use. But I'm curious from your perspective, this is where you guys get involved. This is where you raise your hand or just shout it out. Tell me about what you think makes up a characteristic, just something simple from a manager or from a leader. Let's start with manager. A successful manager has to be what? Organized. Good. Great. What else? Competent. Great. Thank you. What else? Confident. We're going to talk about that tonight. What, Angie? Open-minded. I'm coming back here to you guys because you guys are hiding back here in the back. Honest. Integrity, right? So incredibly important. Great. What else? Attention to detail. Yeah, huge. And are all these things that are important to your practice, your future practice? Yeah, very, very important. And then leadership. Anything in leadership in particular? You've already said a few of them, like honesty and integrity, but what else? Anybody want to throw anything out that you haven't already covered? No? Okay. So, these are just some examples of leaders and leadership and management characteristics. But let's kind of break it down a little bit. I came up with these 5. I call it my fully involved top 5 of things that I saw happening in the dental space. And I'm going to use some fire parallels too, just to kind of show you kind of how they go together. The first one, you said it back here, thank you. Have confidence and build trust with unending humility. Very important. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. But humility is probably the more important part of that, right? Being confident, if you overdo it, it becomes arrogant and creates all kinds of problems with culture in your practice. Second, creating a culture of interlocking accountability. And what I mean by that is everybody working together and holding everybody accountable together, and your team holding one another accountable. We'll get to that as well. Forge formidable bonds and 1-minute meetings, I'll show you that. Practice the indisputable power of recognition. Recognizing your team, so vitally important, right? And then the last one simply is just working with partners, which I can't ever leave that out because I came from that space. So I'm going to share this with you. You guys hear about this? This happens to be one in Ohio as an example of trust. Building trust in your team and having trust in your team members. This is one of the things that we saw at Patterson. And sometimes we'd sit around and just shake our heads like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that dentist let that happen, right? This happened in Kentucky recently. This was in Ohio, where a bunch of firefighters were hazed by some officers in the fire department. Hazed bad, right? This one happened in Ohio. And the first question I always ask is, why did the chief or a district chief or battalion chief allow that to happen? How do you not know that these guys are out back doing this kind of stuff to new firefighters? How do you not know that, right? But it just happened in Kentucky. Where was it? Y'all know? Anybody know where it happened in Kentucky? It was recent. Of course, I hear about it because I get that news. Trust, but verify. Trust that those guys are doing the right things to train and develop, but verify that it's not going overboard, right? What about in a dental office? Do you think it happens in a dental office? This is one thing that we saw a lot and continue to see a lot. So I threw these numbers out last night to the team in Louisville. Anybody have any thoughts about what these numbers might be as it relates to where a dentist trusts that maybe his office manager, as an example, is doing the job that he hired her or him to do? What might the 60% be? Patterson said it. You said it too, right? Fraud and embezzlement. First number. 60% of dentists in their career will have embezzlement happen. 60% of you in this room, so we can take really this half, of you will have embezzlement happen. What is 5%? Anybody have any idea? How many get caught? You may be right about that. A lot of times, we've seen a lot of times dentists will just say, you just leave and we'll call this even, right? We see that, right? We'd prefer you take more action. 60% of dental offices, 5%, this is what this is. Essentially, every year that this happens, right, you have fraud taking place, 5% of your top line is going to go out the door to fraud. 5%. 5%. So what do you think the $1 million is? This is my number.
Over the lifetime.
Total loss.
Over 20 years, if you're a $1 million practice, you will have lost $1 million if you let it go for 20 years. Anybody think $1 million is important? Yeah. Guys, we've seen this over and over and over again. And my team sometimes will see it even happening, right? And softly say to the dentist, hey, maybe you should do an audit. Maybe you should check some things. Please don't let this be you. Trust, but verify. Create a trusting environment. That's so critically important. Interlocking accountability. What do we mean by that? Again, that's having kind of the whole team hold each other accountable. Pretty cool, right? Wouldn't that be nice if everybody could hold each other rather than you, the principal, having to be the one to do all of that? So we say on here, encouraging a team culture that promotes having each other's backs. So that's something that you want to be able to do to make sure. Firefighters do. If we didn't have each other's backs, firefighters ain't going into burning buildings, right? I got to know that this guy right here is going to pull me out when the floor collapses, right? And the team out front is going to come get me as well. Same thing in your space. Rejecting any and all behavior that criticizes other team members. You hear it. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear it all the time. As a principal, you're going to hear somebody complaining about another team member. And you can choose to say, maybe it's not that big a deal. Or you can choose to say, hey, when you get a chance, would you come into my office real quick? I want to have a quick conversation with you. I heard you say this. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on. Have the courage to do that. You've got to do that, guys, You've got to do that. You can't let that fester. You can't let it go on. We see it happening over and over again. And rewarding team success. That's one way to help with that. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Let's talk about accountability and trust again, a little bit more depth. So I'm going to kind of throw this out there. This is a poll. What, from you're flying, and where do you think that more really bad disaster stuff happens in air travel? When the captain's flying the plane or the first officer's flying the plane? What do y'all think? Bad things happen with captain flying. Is that what you're saying, Elijah? Who agrees with Elijah? Raise your hand. You got to take part. Captain. All right. How many think it's first officer flying? Bad things happen. A few of you? I saw your hand raised back there, man. So that's okay. That makes sense, right? First officer. Tenerife, back in 1977, the worst air disaster of all time. 587, I believe, total killed on a runway. Who's flying? The captain. The first officer, by the way, sees something and says, I'm not quite sure that runway's clear. But doesn't speak up loud enough because they created a culture of the captain, the guy in charge, is the one who makes those decisions. So they create a culture of the head guy in charge is the guy who makes the decision, so I'm not going to say anything. This is called an authority gradient. When you don't say something, don't speak up, because somebody in charge of you higher than you is the one that is allowed to make the decisions. On the other hand, what happens when the first officer's flying? What does the captain do? The captain says, hey, whoa, don't take off yet, right? But the first officer, on the other hand, when the captain's flying, is a little timid. Well, the captain knows what he's doing. 587 people die. This is one of many that have happened in the airline industry. One of many. Do you all think that this happens in dentistry? Let's say you and your team. Yeah? It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Whenever the dentist is ready to pull number 14, and the dental assistant says, gosh, I thought that was 13, but doesn't say anything. And he goes ahead and extracts 14. What do you think happens then? Lawsuits, all those things happen. Again, authority gradient, because she thinks he's in charge, he's not going to do that. So what do you guys do? What should you do? You should be the one to say, from now on, in my practice, if you see something, if you question, even me with my authority, I'm the principal of this practice, please say something. Please say something, because I make mistakes too. Don't be that dentist that says, I make the decisions, don't say anything. Don't be that dentist. Don't be that one. That's how you also create a great culture as well. So something to think about. Remember that. Remember the airplane. Hopefully that'll help you remember it.
Well, I'm not going to dentist ever again.
My wife just said she's not going to the dentist ever again now. In case you didn't hear that in the back. All right. No, she's going to fly. Accountability and conflict. Manage conflict. We've already talked about this, but when you start to see conflict happening in your practice, please, by all means, just take care of it. Call the people in, whatever you have to do. Don't wait. Don't let it fester. That's very important. Take swift and decisive actions that are adversely impacting your team culture. Again, don't wait. Something I always say, and this is something that we see a lot. In fact, the dentist that was in Louisville last night, Dr. Aiken, I turned to him right away and asked him this question. And we don't have a dentist in here, right? I mean, a practicing dentist yet. And I asked him, I said, let me ask you a question. When you have to finally make the decision to let somebody go based on some kind of performance or whatever the case might be, what is the first thing that you think of, or the first thing that comes to mind when that person walks out the door? What do you think it is? Anybody? What's the first thing that you think most dentists would say after they let somebody go? What's that? Yeah, that's a great point. That's probably their biggest worry.
Should have done it a while ago. Yeah.
Liz knows. Being in retail, should have done it a long time ago. And Sean Aiken last night was immediately said, I should have done that a year ago. We don't, right, guys? Right? I'm looking at this table up here because we work with so many dentists. You just hang on, right? An example, I worked with another rep, territory rep, out west in Kentucky. And we sat down with the whole team. There were 3 dentists, very, very successful practice. And then we sat down with the office manager after the 3 walked out. And I said, I picked up on something here. We're trying to help them. We're trying to help them. They were probably a $3-4 million practice, and they weren't making money, basically. And so I said, help me out. Help me understand this. You guys talked a little bit about this hygienist. What's going on? I said, well, she's an absolute toxicity. She's totally toxic to the entire practice, a hygienist. And I said, well, how long has she been here? You know, how long y'all been tolerating this? She said, 20 years. 20 years? So what have y'all done in 20 years? I mean, you're still tolerating it. Yeah, nothing, right? So I can't underscore this. And if you remember nothing else, maybe remember this one. Hire slow, fire fast. You'll regret it if you don't fire fast. By the way, document, and I'm not suggesting you do something to violate HR policies. You got to do that. Document, make sure you have good, solid reasons to terminate people. Hire slowly. Make sure you're doing it right. Behavior-based interviewing, all those kind of things. Fire fast. Hire slow, fire fast. Please remember that, if nothing else. This guy spoke last week in this conference, so I just had to talk about this. It's really, this kind of goes to show the importance of culture and creating that culture. This guy, you probably haven't heard of him before, but his name's Frank Vescuso. He's written 15 books in the fire service, one of which is Common Valor. You may have even heard about it years ago. Very, very well spoken. This guy's a stud. I mean, he's just a stud. That's all I can say. He gets up there and he just commands this unbelievable presence and crazy. But he was a district chief up in New Jersey. All these guys talk like this. Hey, make sure you do this. Hey, New York and New Jersey. That's what these guys were all this way. And he's like that. Actually, he was for a day and a half. I heard that. After you're done, you're talking that way because you've been listening to him for so long. But he had this way of managing people called the 1-minute meeting. I tried to do something like this as a leader in my corporate career, and I hope you guys do it too. But what he would do is he would go around to the firehouses, a district chief. So he wasn't a battalion chief, he was over those guys. And he'd go around and he would basically go up to the firehouses, and whoever he'd run into first, he'd have this little checklist that he'd carry along with him, and he knew what to ask. Obviously, it became very rote for him over time. Good morning. How's the family? How's whoever, right? He kept up with these guys enough. They're like a big family in the fire, like true brotherhood. How's the family? How's whoever? What are your plans today? What are the daily plans? And where's the captain? I need to catch up with him. So he'd do the same thing every day. He gets dispatched on a still alarm, basically. They get there, nothing going on. So he starts to leave, and the firefighter walks around, and he says, hey, Joe, what's going on, man? He says, oh, nothing, we're getting ready to clean up here and get heading back to firehouse. He says, last time I caught up with you, your mom wasn't doing well. How's she doing? He said, not well. And he said, what do you mean? Well, what's going on? He says, Chief, she's not doing well. And he said, okay. He said, what's the plan? He goes, well, I got somebody coming in at 6 o'clock to fill in for me tonight. This was in the morning, like 8 o'clock in the morning. I got somebody coming in and filling in for me tonight, so I'm going to go to the hospital and see her. He said, okay. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, you're not going anywhere. He said, I got somebody coming right now. I'm going to call him right now. I'm going to come get you. I'm going to take you to the hospital. You're going to go now. He said, no, Chief, I can't do that. I can't take that time. He said, you're going to go now. He said, I'll get someone covered for you. Off he goes. Engine goes out of service for a little while they get another driver in. Gets to the hospital. 2 hours later, his mom died. Passed away 2 hours later. And Frank says, that's why I always ask, how's the family? How's your mom? How's whoever? Because in that particular case, it made all the difference in the world. Be that principal. Be that practice owner, right? Even if you go into corporate dentistry, ask the questions of your team, right? How's the family? It really does matter. It really does matter. So I respect this guy, and it made a lot of sense to me. I made this kind of as best I could, but recognition is so critically important, but it's the small things that are so big that you do to recognize people, the small things. One of the things that I did as a leader at Patterson, I got up here as text, and you know, a lot of times I would just text somebody and say, hey, how's your mom? Are they doing okay? I would also use my drive time. So when I'm driving home that day, if my wife's calling me and I don't answer, I would say I'm on the phone with somebody. She knew that. I would oftentimes use that drive time to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, I was just checking in with you. Sometimes I got voicemail. My team would get me to voicemail all the time. Each shit button, constant, right? And that's okay because I leave a voicemail. Hey, say, I'm just checking on how your mom's doing, just checking on how your dad's doing. And it means a lot to your employees. It means a lot. So please do the small things. The small things really, really do matter, right? The old saying, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. That's really true. Other ideas, you can send emails. If you're emailing, you know, sitting there in between patients, just send an email to somebody. Say, hey, just checking in on you. How you doing today? Maybe they're homesick. Notes and cards, really simple to do, right? Just write a quick note, just thinking of you today. Thanks for your work with that patient the other day. You did great. I really appreciate you. Boop, pop it in their cubby, right? So things you can do there. Huddle, personal check-ins. You know, if you have morning huddles, which many of you will do, it's perfectly okay to say, hey, real quick, you can figure out how you want to do this, but I know you've had some issues with the family members. Is she okay? Is she okay? I would have many principals that would say, let's stop and you know, say a quick prayer to yourself or whatever for her. Let's think about her. So those are things you can do. That's how you'll figure out how to do that. And then gift cards. You know, have little $10 gift cards for Starbucks or whatever. And when somebody does something great for your practice, hand it to them. Say, thanks for doing that. Thanks for that out-of-the-box thinking. That means a lot to my practice, or to our practice, right? So be thinking about how you can go about doing that as well. Very, very important. And finally, partnerships truly matter. You're going to hear this over and over and over again. Dr. Aiken talked about it forever last night, right? Kristina? The importance of not just doing business with your second cousin to build your practice, right? Work with somebody who builds dental practices. Work with accountants and insurance guys, right? Guys that are in real estate. Work with all those guys because that's what they do. That's what they do. And it's not worth it. It's not worth it to try to save pennies on the bottom line. Okay? It's just not. So I would have put all the sponsors up here, but I didn't have them, Joe. I retired back in September. I would have put all of our sponsors up here, but as an example, Patterson and Fortune being here tonight. We do this because we love working with you guys, by the way. We really, truly do love working with you. So real quick, just a real quick summary, why leadership matters early for you guys. Dentistry is healthcare and business. So clinical is what you guys are learning now in a 4-year period. You'll learn a lot of clinical. The business part of it is something critically important, so I'm glad you're here because I know that means you guys really care about that. Leadership impacts career satisfaction. You will be happy when you become a better leader and you create great culture. Trust me, if you have bad culture, every day will be a nightmare for you. Every day will be a nightmare. We see it all the time. And dentists finally say, I'm out. I'm selling to corporate, or I'm just going to close the doors. So culture is so critically important. And strong leaders build trust and stability in a practice. So very important. So as you guys, just something I'm thinking about here. You guys are students, but you're still practicing dentistry, right? You're still seeing patients. So be thinking about how you can begin to do this now, right? Be that vision setter. Be thinking about how you can set a vision for what your practice might look like. How do you differentiate yourself? So very important. You're shaping the culture. I always say when we walk into a dental practice, the second we walk in, culture ekes from the nooks and crannies of that practice. You can feel it immediately. And you can also feel when culture sucks. You can feel it. And you'll feel it too. It'll be right down here in your gut. Make sure you're creating a great culture. All the things we've talked about. A team collaborator, working as a team. Everybody works together. Everybody helps decide policies and procedures and all those things together. And they buy into it that way. Be an ethical decision maker. Thank you in the back for talking about honesty. And be a lifelong learner. Never stop. Never stop learning. Very, very important. So, quick takeaways. Leadership is learnable. It's not something you're necessarily just born with. Start early. Start now. You guys can start this stuff right now. And your future practice truly starts now. Be thinking about every day in your mind what that looks like. Questions for me before I hand the baton? Questions? Yes. Noah.
What advice through your time just working with so over the years would you give for that hiring process, as far as like, how can you interview, because everyone wants to look their best when they're interviewing for a position. How can you kind of weed through the BS, or kind of set up a system to verify they're going to be up to standard for what kind of culture you're trying to set?
Okay, did y'all hear that in the back? Did you guys hear that back there? Basically, what he was saying is, how do you try to hire the right people on the front end to make sure that they're not BSing you? I think was the word that he used. How do you go about doing that? How do you create processes to go about doing that? The one thing I always tell hiring managers is when somebody walks in to your practice and sits down, and you immediately look at them and say, "Man, they'd be a great fit in this practice." What is that? A gut feeling, right? The first thing I say about hiring is do everything you can to break down that gut feeling. Everything you can to say, just because this person looks like they might be a good fit, because they dress nice, they presented well, doesn't mean they're going to be that. So do everything you can to break that. And what I recommend is behavior-based interviewing, right? Past actions predict future success and future performance. So what people have done in the past is such a good indicator of what kind of employee they're going to be for you in the future, right? And I call it peeling back the onion. When you know what the competencies are for that role, it's a dental assistant, hygienist, whatever the case might be. If you know the competencies, you build behavior-based interviewing questions based on those competencies specifically. I'm not going to ask you what your favorite color is or what kind of animal you like best. I don't care about that. I want to know that if a competency is this, one of that maybe getting along with other team members, I want to know about a time in the past where you've done that and you've worked well or you've worked against that. And when you peel back the onion, you're going to find out more and more about actually what maybe they didn't do in that BSing that they're trying to do. It's a behavior-based interviewing process. I'll be happy to share it with anybody. I've got a whole training session that I could do on it. But that's how. That could be a much longer conversation. But it's so critically important because you will regret it. You will regret it. My team, they know, or I've said, man, I didn't see that. I just didn't see it in an interview. And I wish I had. Because you know how much it costs to replace that person? In culture, because they were a bad employee with other people, in money, all those things. You don't want to do it. You want to hire slow and do it right through behavior-based interviewing, identifying those competencies and going after that. Hope that helps. Yes.
So I tell my clients all the time, don't hire anyone without a working interview. You bring them in when patients and team are at practice, and the whole team knows this person's interviewing for a role with us. They're going to interact with this new person. You're going to watch how they interact with patients. When that patient is done interacting, you're going to say, hey, that's somebody we're considering to make a part of our practice. How did you feel working with them? Did you feel comfortable with them in the room? Did they give you the information? Did you feel like they were communicating clearly? And so you're going to ask the patients about their experience during that working interview, and then you ask the team. So once that person has gone home for the day, you ask the team, and one of the most important questions that I always say you have to ask the team is, do we feel like anything was fake? Do we feel like anything was inauthentic? And we try to teach people how to read between nerves and inauthenticity, because that can sometimes when people are nervous, they can show up a little weird. So we try to differentiate, was it nerves or was it them being weird, was it them being fake? But you learn when you're with somebody for a couple of hours and you're watching them interact with patients and with team members, it starts to give you a different picture. And then it's not one person making a decision, it's the entire team weighing in. And when you get those other perspectives, you're gonna learn things that you wouldn't have seen on your own. So it's using the power of the collective and making sure that the people on your team are also a part of this hiring decision.
That help? Okay. What else? Any other questions you have for me? And we're going to keep this going tonight. We'll do Q&A as well as we go throughout. So hearing none, please hold anything, and then we'll cover at the end. I'm going to bring Kristina up, and I'll change your slides at the same time we're doing that. Okay? Okay. Thank y'all.
Can I get my lapel?
We remembered. Collectively, we remembered. Awesome. So I'm Kristina Johnson with Fortune Management. I have been here with you guys a couple of times over the years. I'm excited to be here with you guys again today. And because John Harris was supposed to be here and numbers are his favorite thing in the world, I get to talk about numbers. A lot of what I work with clients on is about the business side. So it may be some of the HR things that Kevin was talking about and leadership development. But oftentimes what we find is when people go to dental school, they're not also getting an MBA. Occasionally, people will do that. Anybody here also getting an MBA? A couple, right? That's not for the faint of heart. Not that dentistry and going to dental schools for the faint of heart either. It definitely is not. But one of the things that I see quite often when I walk into a practice is that the owner does not know their numbers. They are unfamiliar with their P&L. They're uncomfortable reading it. How many people in here have looked at a profit and loss statement before? Awesome. We're going to look at one together tonight. We're not going to go through all the numbers. I don't want to put anybody to sleep, but we're going to talk a little bit about the numbers and what that looks like so that you guys can start thinking about these things. And it's also going to help you know the questions that you need to ask as you go into a practice and you're looking for an associateship. Cool. I'm also pretty casual as I'm talking and you guys have questions or something pops in your mind, you're like, hey, what about this other thing? Please just throw a hand up, speak up. I would love for this to be more of a dialogue than a monologue, okay? So from my vantage point, I always tell people there's two types of work in any business. Oh, you're thinking about my 4'10" vantage point. Thank you, Joe. So there's two types of work in any business. As an owner, you work in the business. So as a dentist, that is doing the dentistry. That's the clinical side of it. It's managing the team. It is making sure payroll goes out. It is the things that make the business function. But there's this other part of work that often dentists, or honestly, if I'm really frank with you, most business owners forget. If they're not being strategic, if they don't have a business background, there is this on the business work. And that means I'm thinking strategically about where this business is headed in 3 to 5, 10 years. I'm thinking about the approach I want to take with this business. How am I going to manage things strategically? What type of culture do I want to have? How am I going to implement change? How am I going to grow? What is my retirement plan? And so the on the business work, a lot of times is the work that catches dentists by surprise. So they didn't realize that they were also going to need to do marketing. They didn't realize that they were also going to need to read their P&L every month. They didn't realize that there were all these other things. They thought they were going to get Fridays off every week. And so a lot of times there is some resentment that bubbles up when they realize there's this on the business work. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. What does working on the business look like as opposed to in the business? Is that tracking? Makes sense? Cool. So I get phone calls for a lot of reasons. Can you guys read? Okay, yeah. Last night we had a very small screen. It was like an eye chart. So these are the things that doctors actually say to me when they call me. And I think anybody working with practices can say they hear these from their clients as well. So I don't have as much money in my bank account as usual. I literally got this call recently, and it was, I don't know what's going on. I used to have X amount in my bank account at the end of every month, and now it's just less and less and less. And so I dig into the financials, and I dig and dig and dig. And I'm like, hey, your payroll really jumped about 6 months ago. What happened? Well, I hired 2 new people, and then I gave everybody a $4 raise. Okay, and did you adjust your fee schedule? No. Did you renegotiate insurance rates? No. Did you change something fundamentally to reduce your other costs? No. So that's why the money was going down. To Kevin's point earlier about embezzlement, I've been in 2 practices in the past 6 months where I got that, hey, something's going on with my bank account. And I go in and, well, the account manager or the office manager is about $30,000 more wealthy over the last 6 months because embezzlement was happening. So that is something I also see. But here's the deal. If you're reading your P&L, you're going to know this. If you're familiar with your financials and you do the on the business work, you're probably not going to have to call me for this reason. So I feel like I'm paying too much for labs, team salaries, whatever it may be. I get this a lot. And most of the time it's based on a feeling. Or, oh, my buddy said that his supplies are about 10% and mine are 15%. Well, you do implants, you have a CEREC, you're buying CEREC blocks and putting that as part of your supplies. Your lab costs are much lower than average, and you do IV sedation. Your supply costs are wildly different with that clinical skill set. So sometimes talking with your buddy and hearing what their supplies are or what their salary costs are isn't really comparative because you're actually running different businesses. So I hear that a lot. The saddest one for me, I'm producing $2 million a year and I can barely make ends meet. Sometimes this is a personal finance issue. I started working with a practice last year that producing $2 million a year, they're collecting at a pretty solid rate. Their AR needed some work, but he was paying himself over $600,000 a year. He was paying his wife another $100,000, and it was his personal finances that were creating a business finance problem. So we actually had to sit down, him, his wife, and me, it was real comfortable, and have a conversation about their personal finances. They did not like the idea of having a budget, so we called it a spending plan. They enjoyed that. They liked that perspective. So we put together a personal spending plan for them so that they could spend differently and be more mindful of their personal finances, because it was their personal finances that were making the practice struggle. And this year, he is preparing to purchase a building. He was able to save enough money, making some of those changes personally, not within the practice, that the practice was doing better. So sometimes that whole I'm producing, we're making money, but there's no money, is you got to dig into the financials as well. It's so funny how often somebody calls me and says, I want to buy a building, can I? I want to bring on an associate, can I? I want to buy this other practice and merge it into mine. Can I do that? I'm like, have you called your banker? But that's not what they're asking. They're not asking if they can get the loan. They're asking if they can sustain the investment. Am I going to be able to make money off of this? Is this going to work out for me long term? So a lot of times, has anybody ever needed it or wanted a new car? Right? Yeah, right? Pretty common. How do you know if you can get a new car? How do you know? If you've got good credit, you have money for a down payment.
You break down your monthly expenses and figure out exactly how much you can make a payment for.
Yeah. How much of a payment can I actually pay every month? Right? It's the same thing. It's just a lot more zeros. A lot more zero, but it's the same thing. And sometimes those purchases can feel scary. So you want to talk to somebody who's seen other people do it and build that confidence. But that question often comes from not knowing their financials. Let's see. I'm ready to sell this year and I want to make as much as possible. That is my least favorite thing to hear. It breaks my heart because a sell price valuation is based on 3 years tax returns. And if you decide you want to sell this year and you want to make changes right now to impact your sell price, you've waited too long. You need to reach out to me 3 years in advance. 3 to 5 years is how long it takes to prepare a practice to sell if you want the highest value for it. I also get the flip side of that. I'm ready to buy, and I want to buy the cheapest practice possible. Sometimes that is a really smart business decision, and sometimes that is a really bad business decision. It just depends on the practice, your clinical skill set, the location, and things like that. So it's not neat and clean. Does anybody like math in here? Yeah. What do you like about math? Working with numbers, problem solving. But there's always an answer. There's only one answer. Last night at the U of L event, somebody was asking about being in a rural area versus in a city. And it was like, where is it better to have a practice? And I loved what Dr. Aiken said. He said, don't let the differences in cost and the differences in competition scare you away from being in a city, from being a city dentist or buying a practice where you want to live. And I thought that was really good advice because I see it in a lot of rural areas. Sometimes it can be easier. There's not as much competition. You know, in places where it's really saturated, you can end up with a lot of competition. You can lose patients quickly because they have other options. And so it's kind of this thing of you choose your hard. With a lot of things in business, there is not a clear right or wrong answer, especially when it's your business. The right answer is what is true and authentic to you, also staying legal, also staying ethical, but what is true and right for one person working in the city, having a practice that accepts a lot of PPOs, versus what is true and right for somebody else being a rural dentist in a different type of area with a different clinical suite. There's not a right or wrong there. There's doing what's best for you. Both of those paths are hard, and you have to choose your hard. You can choose the hard that is being a city dentist where there's more competition and you're going to pay more for the practice most likely, and all of those things. And that's hard. You're going to have to work harder. You're going to have a bigger clinical skill set. There's a lot that goes into that. But there's also the heart of being somebody who wants to live in a city, living in a really rural place in the middle of nowhere and being unhappy with that. That's also really hard. So if you're going to pick your hard, pick the hard that is most true and authentic to you. Let's see. And my favorite, and I just threw it on here for fun, I don't know why my team doesn't just do what I tell them to do. I get that one all the time. You hear that all the time, Kevin? Yeah. So these are 12 areas. We are not getting in all of these 12 areas, but these are 12 areas where we look at and measure numbers to understand the health of business. These are things that if you're working with a coach, if you're working with anybody who's doing evaluation, sometimes your banker, sometimes your accountant will think of things in these categories. I like buckets because business can be so broad. So I like putting it in nice, clean buckets. It's kind of like taking this nebulous thing with not a lot of right or wrong answers and giving it some boundaries and clarity for those of you who like the math. So this is where it gets fun. Again, we're not going through all of this. Who gets excited when they see a wall of numbers? My friend Joan, my new friend Liz, you get excited with a wall of numbers. Who feels a little anxious when they see a wall of numbers? Yeah, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't be intimidated by a wall of numbers. The numbers actually don't mean a lot. The story behind what those numbers mean is what you need to get to. So every number up here is telling you a story. And it's about figuring out, what is this number telling me? Is that something that is favorable? Or is that something that I want to change? That's what you're asking yourself when you look at a big old wall of numbers. So this is actually a 2-page profit and loss statement. It is an actual profit and loss statement from someone that I have actually worked with. So real practice, real numbers. You thought you were in dental school, but I'm giving you an eye test here. So the top half here is showing the income for this particular practice. It has the income for this month, and then the income for the same month in the previous year. A lot of times we're comparing to the previous year because we want to know, did we grow something? Did we shrink something? And growing or shrinking something, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. If we grow income, is that good or bad? Good. If we grew supply costs, is that good or bad? It depends. Because growing those supply costs could have been because we grew our patient base and our clinical suite, and that's actually what allowed us to grow our income and our production. So I actually prefer to look at the percentages. I can tell you most of the clients that I work with, I can tell you their percentages in a heartbeat. I know their percentages better than they do, but sometimes I cannot tell you what the number is. I can tell you their salaries are 22% of their revenue, but I cannot tell you what that number is every month because I'm looking at the percentages to understand the health of the business. One of the things, so this practice saw a lot of change. I love looking at, and you guys can't see it, but it's going to show us the increase year over year in some places. And so when we're looking at increase year over year, again, the question becomes not what is this number, but what is this story telling us? What do we know about this number? So I had a practice recently, and they don't look at their P&L. Their accountant sends it to them and to me at the same time. I look at their P&L every month. I joke that they're paying a lot for P&L review. And I was looking at it and I was like, guys, what in the world happened to your supply cost? It's usually just under 10,000, just under 10,000. And all of a sudden you're like $9,000 higher. You're at $19,000. What happened? And so the name of the game with P&L and looking at numbers and evaluating the numbers, it's really about just asking questions. It's not about making assumptions or making judgments. It's about what is this trying to tell me? So it's like, guys, what happened with your supplies? And so we go back to the accountant and we're like, hey, can you just send me all the individual supplies that were billed? And what happened is their accountant took all of their Patterson and anything that they paid Patterson and they lumped it under supplies. What services does Patterson offer? A gazillion? Yeah. Equipment, software, service. And so we start looking and I'm like, hey, why is this bill so high? Well, they had equipment break and they had one of their assistants navigating the conversation with the service rep from Patterson instead of them. And their assistant came in and said, hey guys, this is really expensive. And they're like, well, we have to have it. And they never asked how much. And they just said they approved something without knowing what it was. And then when I was like, hey guys, why did your supply costs go up so much? They didn't even know it was their supply costs. Are they good or bad owners? They're really great business owners. They're really competent people. They just don't have the numbers down yet. That's why they brought me in. We're working on building their comfort with numbers because every time they look at a P&L, they get anxious, they get stressed, they feel overwhelmed. So I sit down and I talk them through the P&L. Last night we were asked, I can't even remember the question we were asked, but it was a good one. And I said, one of the things you need somebody that you can go ask the dumb questions to. And I, I was joking with Liz earlier. Rick Beckman, who is a Patterson rep, is one of my people that I go ask dumb questions to, because he's going to laugh with me, not at me. I know that he's going to be like, silly Kristina. And then he's going to tell me in a non-condescending way. And then he's not going to go tell people about that really dumb question I asked him. So have people that you can go ask the dumb question to. Have somebody that you can admit, crap, I don't know why that cost went up. Oh, I approved a huge repair and I didn't even know the cost of it, right? What did we learn? How are we growing? A bad business owner is somebody who has that happen and doesn't learn from it. A good business owner makes mistakes and learns from it. That's the difference. You're gonna make mistakes. I make mistakes almost every day. My husband loves to remind me that one time I was wrong. No, so you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna learn faster and grow faster if you own them quickly and learn from them. You're gonna grow even faster if you can learn from other people's mistakes. That's where having this network of people comes in. If you can learn from Joan's other client in Hopkinsville, their mistake, and she can tell you about it and you can learn from it and not make the same one yourself, that's a huge win. That's gonna accelerate your path forward. If Clinton can tell you the story of somebody who did something really boneheaded in a real estate negotiation, and you can learn from that and not repeat that mistake, it's gonna make you move forward faster. So learn from your own mistakes, but also hear stories of other people's mistakes and learn from those too. Is that tracking? Questions? No questions? Thoughts? Yeah,
I have a question.
of course.
How can you, obviously looking at P&L, but just in general, how can you kind of figure out an ROI on different things? Obviously, something simple like a new technology, you can maybe figure out, okay, it helped me produce this much. But how do you figure out an ROI on like hiring someone new or a new service you bring on or new support like third party? How do you figure that stuff out?
Yeah, did you guys hear his question? How do you figure out the return on your investment, the ROI, for things like hiring someone or a technology investment and things like that? It can get gnarly and complicated, but it's really hard to do a straight line of ROI on hiring someone. Of course, there is, when you hire a hygienist, you know how much they're producing. I have clients who have hygienists who are making top dollar and they're not producing as much, but they are really, really exceptional at co-enrollment. They understand that dentist's clinical philosophy. They can look in a patient's mouth and know that dentist is going to want to do a crown versus a 3-surface filling. And they are talking to that patient before the dentist ever walks in and preparing them for that conversation. And they sell the treatment and they get the patient to accept treatment before the dentist has ever really walked in. That hygienist, you also have to look at what is treatment acceptance for patients who are in their column. Because she may not produce that much, she may not be doing SRPs, she may not be the best at perio, but if she is great at co-enrollment, we have a hygienist at one of my practices who has veneers and she thinks it's the best thing in the world. And the practice didn't even do veneers a couple of years ago. And she has been just enrolling patients constantly in veneers. Well, insurance doesn't cover that. It's an insurance heavy practice. It has increased their production greatly. So he gave her a raise, but her production hadn't gone up, but she had been bringing in more money. So it's paying a lot of attention. If you're going through the numbers, it's asking, what story is this telling me? We have spreadsheets that help you do the ROI on a CEREC, right? I'll be the first person looking at the data and going, you do enough crowns, you got to get out of the lab and start milling in-house. And then I'm going to call somebody at Patterson because that is the extent of my lab knowledge is it's time and they're the experts, right? So last night we talked a lot about having a team around you and having people that are going to connect you to other people. So I might be able to look at your volume of crowns and your lab fees. Like, we're going to see your lab fees going up. And you're going to be like, oh, I'm doing all of this restoration. I'm doing all these labs. And so there is a tipping point where it's just math, that it's time to bring labs in-house. And so that's hiring a person usually. It's getting the equipment. It's building that lab where you can actually do the work in-house. So then once you do that and you build it, then it's math. Okay, here's what I'm paid for the equipment. Here's what I'm paying for the person. Am I saving that in lab bills? And that math is usually pretty straightforward. So it really depends, but it's always what is the story behind the number? Because you can do the math and the math will tell you, oh, this, an assistant should make. Does anybody know what a typical assistant makes in this area? 23, 38, 28, right? 20. Yeah, right? So it varies. I have a practice in Louisville that has an assistant who's on salary at $75,000 a year. Why in the world? Because she is really phenomenal at enrolling people in full mouth restoration. She enrolls probably 2 a week. So 2 $30,000 to $60,000 treatments a week. And she holds their hand through the whole process. She goes into the surgery op. She holds the head while the surgeon's working, right? She is phenomenal at that. Patients trust her. She tells great stories. She connects with them. She makes that dentist more than he could possibly pay her. So when I first said, I know Annetta making $75,000 a year who's on salary, who works 3 days a week. Let's like continue to, and gets insurance paid for, right? But she's making that practice a lot of money. So again, it is, what is the number, but what is the story behind the number? You can't look at a spreadsheet or a P&L and say, are we paying too much? It's never that clear cut. Have I made numbers a little less boring? Slightly? I'll take it. Any other questions that are popping up for you guys? Oh, I got the hook. Okay. So when I go into a practice, if you're working with an accountant, they're going to tell you every year, here's the average of what we see in the dental industry. When I am evaluating somebody's numbers, I am not looking at average. I am looking at best in class. Fortune has data. Fortune is a nationwide company. We're in all 50 states. There's over 150 coaches throughout the country, and they've been around for 35 years. So they have thousands of practices worth of data over 35 years, and we've seen what is best in class and what the top 5% looks like. We also get data from other places like Dental Intel, and there's a lot of industry data out there. And so what we base our numbers on are the top 5% of practices. So the top 5% of practices that we know are elite, doing it the best, that's what I compare numbers to. These are some of the ones I look for. So admin wages between 6 and 8%, assistant wages between 6 and 8%, hygiene wages between 8 and 10. And so an associate dentist between 20 and 22% of revenue. We want to see supplies between 6 and 8. And so again, I have these benchmarks. I'll go into a practice and I'll compare to the benchmarks. And when something's way under or way over, I don't tell them, hey, you have a problem here. That's just the indicator to start asking questions. That's the indicator to be curious. Hey, I noticed you're paying your assistant a lot of money. What's that about? Right? Whose cousin is she? She married to the mayor. Like, what is going on here? And you get the story behind the numbers. Like the story I was telling you about an accountant putting a repair bill in with supplies. Supplies looked high, but it wasn't. So really, looking at the numbers is the place you start for asking questions. It's a diagnostic tool, but it's not a complete diagnostic tool. And then I'll spend the last couple of seconds on this. What matters sometimes more than what the numbers are is what your relationship with money is. How many people are going to graduate dental school with debt? How many people feel good about that? So in my world, we classify debt in two ways. We say there's good debt and bad debt. Good debt is an investment in yourself, in your future. It is debt that is going to move you forward. That is an investment. We classify your student loan debts as good debt. Buying a practice, good debt. Buying equipment, good debt. Cars, fancy clothes, a $5,000 watch, bad debt. So when we talk about debt, it's leverage. It's a tool. Anybody see somebody do beautiful work, restorative work, creative work with dental tools? You ever seen somebody's life changed because their mouth changed, their smile changed? Those dental tools are tools. Have you ever seen somebody's mouth and smile completely destroyed because somebody used those tools inappropriately? They're just tools. Are dental tools good or bad? They're morally neutral. And so is debt. Debt is morally neutral. It is good if you're using it to build and to restore and to grow. And it's bad if you're using it in a way that's destructive. So your relationship with money, and you guys, I think have probably heard me say this before, I talk about it a lot. I find it to be one of the biggest things that hold dentists back, that hold owners back, is their fear of debt, their discomfort with money, their anxiety of looking at a P&L. Get a healthy relationship with money. It is just a tool. Just like your dental tools. Get a good relationship with investment debt. It is just a tool, just like your dental tools. Get just as comfortable thinking about them as tools as you are trying to get comfortable using them in patients' mouths. I'm seeing a lot of head nods and smiles, so I'm going to take that as my cue that I did my job tonight. Thank you for the engagement. If you guys have questions or need anything, I am around. If you want to chat, I have business cards. At any point, if somebody wants support, we're here for you guys. One of the services that we offer to SDBO students is we will look over associate contracts for you, completely free. We're not looking at it from an attorney perspective. You still need an attorney to look at it, but we will tell you, are you getting a competitive offer for the zip code you're in? Are you getting a competitive offer based on what other people are getting in the area? So we'll do that. We also help people evaluate buys. So when you get ready to buy, we do a lot of complimentary work for SDBO students there too. So if anybody needs us, you know where we are. Can I get a round of applause as well for Mr. Kevin Parker? Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Awesome stuff. Yes, absolutely. Let's hear it for Kristina. Yay! All right. Awesome. Hey, real quick, one thing that we'd like to remind you guys this coming year, Those of you who have not yet secured opportunities in your